I saw your tweet before you came on, and you called this like the hardest hour in radio. And I take it, and I don't take exception to it. I was like, I was proud at the same time. I'm like, no, no, we just talk, right? And I feel like we're so not used to being asked questions and answering and having conversation, discourse, and civil at the same time, tough sometimes. If we don't agree, we don't have to agree, but that
That's why it's hard. Yes.
okay. I feel like this should be the way, the truth, and this should be the way we converse. I'm tired of the sound bites. I'm tired of the 2 minutes, and then you have somebody versus. It's like a versus, and then y'all are fighting, and then we don't get nourished at all. These conversations need to suss out.
That's why I come on the show. That's why you're right. It's been too long. That's why I try to make sure that I keep you guys in my speed dial, because this is a different kind of conversation than I get to have in lots of other media places, and I enjoy it. But I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy.
Okay, all right. I'll be mindful of that because I just look at you as somebody that's super smart. As a matter of fact, I was talking about a story that I didn't realize you did. On Monday, I was having this conversation about the Supreme Court ruling against DeRay McKesson's desire to, not be sued. And we had an extensive conversation about it, and I didn't realize that this was your piece in the Nation. It's like, oh, that's Elie Mystal. Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't give you credit for it. So talk about why you wrote about this case and why it's important beyond DeRay McKesson.
Yeah, well, I've been following it for a while because it's so freaking stupid, and it's such an obvious attempt by whites, and I mean that as plainly as that, by white people in Louisiana to stop Black protesters, specifically Black Lives protesters, Black Lives Matters protesters, specifically protesters against police brutality. But that's the whole game here, because what DeRay is accused of is inciting a riot. In the 2016, he's accused of inciting a riot. In 2016, after the murder of Alton Sterling, DeRay and others organized a protest in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to protest the murder of Alton Sterling, right? At that protest, somebody threw a rock, and that rock hit a police officer, in fairness, severely injuring the police officer, right? And we don't support that. Thing is, DeRay ain't throw no rocks.
Right.
DeRay didn't show up with rocks. DeRay doesn't know who threw the rock. I don't know who threw the rock. Nobody knows who threw the rock. Whoever threw the rock has never been found, has never been prosecuted. And so instead of finding the rock thrower, the police sued DeRay and sued him on this trumped up theory of inciting a riot. At first, they said that he colluded with the rock thrower. Impossible to prove because ain't nobody know who the rock thrower is. And they said that he negligently incited the riot because by simply protesting close to a police station, which is where the protest took place, because if you're going to protest police brutality, you kind of go to where the cops live, right? But by starting a protest, organizing a protest near a police station, DeRay should have known that violence was likely, and thus he is liable for all of the violence that happened, including this rock thrower. It's a ridiculous precedent set by the Louisiana State Court and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then the Supreme Court on Monday, instead of throwing the case out, which, I mean, it's a ridiculous argument, instead of throwing the case out, the Supreme Court allowed it to continue, which means that now DeRay has to stand trial in Louisiana over this mess. It's a terrible standard. And the other point that I try to get readers to understand, when I say that I don't know who threw the rock, I don't mean that as a kind of throwaway, ha-ha funny line. I literally mean that the person who threw a rock could have been part of the Black Lives Matter protest, but they could not have been, right? They could have been a false flag operation, somebody going to the protest specifically to cause violence in order to embarrass Black Lives Matter, right?
Like during one of the protests when a magical crate of bricks, a pallet of bricks showed up, and then there was one where the police officers were literally knocking out the windows with the billy club,
We
We've
know
seen it.
MAGA does this. We know
Right.
MAGA puts people in our own communities with the desire to destroy us from within. And this rock thrower could have been that guy. I mean, like I said, ain't never been found, right? Another argument here is that the rock thrower could have been trying to throw a rock at DeRay, missed, and hit the police officer, right?
Right.
Like, we literally have no idea why this protester or this non-protester, this counter-protester, threw this rock. Yet, it's Black Lives Matter. It's DeRay who's allegedly responsible for all of the injuries. Well, imagine what that standard looks like if you apply that to everybody, right? That means anybody can go to a protest that they disagree with, can be part of a cause that they are actually counter to, go to a protest, start some mess, start some violence, and then it's the it's the protest organizers who get put on the hook for it, not the person who actually did the deed. So technically speaking, I could show up at a Trump rally, start throwing some rocks around, and
Right.
then they'd have to sue Donald Trump because it's his fault,
Correct.
right?
So this is a slippery slope, and I feel like we're on a bunch of slippery slopes, which is why I think America's about to bust our ass royally and maybe not be able to put the ass chips back together. But as I was reading your piece in the Nation, I was also confused about how it got to the Supreme Court. Like this, this is a signal to something else. Like I'm always looking at, okay, they throw the rock and hide their hand, literally in this case. What's really going on here, Elie?
It's a First Amendment issue, right? It's a whether or not you have the right to protest. So DeRay is sued by the cop, John Doe. We don't know the cop's actual name. Louisiana says, yeah, that's okay. And DeRay appeals over his constitutional rights. So that's how we get from Louisiana to the Supreme Court. He's arguing for his constitutional First Amendment rights. And so, again, as I pointed out in my piece, you know who else has a constitutional right to start a protest, even if it sometimes gets violent? Oh, that would be Donald Trump. And you'll note, none of the officers who were injured on January 6th, Mike Fanone, none of those guys sued Donald Trump for their injuries after January 6th. Why? Because when you apply the First Amendment to white people, you can't. Because for everything Trump said, and Trump said a lot of terrible things, some of which he's being held accountable for, Trump did not say, go beat up some police officers, right? Go take some bear spray and spray it on Michael Fanone. He didn't say that. And without that level of specificity, when we're talking about white people, without that level of specificity, you're not allowed to sue white protest organizers if you happen to get injured by their violent, angry mob they call to the ellipse on January 6th. You're not allowed to do it. So when the First Amendment is applied to white people, Donald Trump gets off scot-free, at least in the case of Michael Fanone. But when applied to black people, all of a sudden, DeRay has to stand trial out of his own pocket.
That's what I was going to ask. So, and this is the other tactic. You get hemmed up in court. I was just sharing with people. I got sued for racism by a black woman who was mad that I didn't publish her book. I got accused of racism. It was wild. It was clearly frivolous. It was clearly, but because I was attached to a giant at the time, I had an imprint at Simon & Schuster, people know that they are going to settle. I was willing to go to the mat, but even in going to the mat on this, you're still got to pay your lawyer, and people who do this, they know you can just run people's pockets, even if you walk away with a victory, unless it's like E.G. and Carroll, where you're gonna have to not just pay me my money, but restitution and all, pain and suffering, and pay my lawyer's fees. Most of us aren't in that situation, and most of us don't have the money to fight this.
It's how Peter Thiel and Hulk Hogan took down Gawker, right?
Wow.
Gawker. That entire news site was taken down through frivolous lawsuits. And if you listen to Peter Thiel, the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan actually won, Peter Thiel, who funded that lawsuit, who funded Hulk Hogan, real name Terry Bollea, to sue Gawker, Peter Thiel will say he didn't expect to win that lawsuit. He didn't expect to win any of the lawsuits against Gawker. His goal, his plan for destroying Gawker was not to win lawsuits, but to bring lawsuits again and again and again and drain Gawker of its financial resources to the point where they can no longer operate. Now, a lot of people don't know this who are not in our business. I know you know this, but a lot of your listeners might not. Most media companies, pretty much anybody that you listen to, is part of a media company that has something called liability insurance, right?
Yes.
Just like your doctor has medical malpractice insurance, media companies have media insurance for exactly these kinds of frivolous lawsuits. SiriusXM has it. The Nation has it. Most media companies have these liability shields. The way the liability shield works, though, is that the more times you get sued, even if you win every single lawsuit against your organization, the premiums on those liability shields go up and up and up and up. And at some point, it becomes too expensive to have the insurance protection that you need from the frivolous lawsuits. That was Peter Thiel's plan to take down Gawker, and it worked. The fact that they actually won one of the lawsuits was like icing on the cake. It wasn't even part of the plan. And so that's also what you have to look at when you have this DeRay situation. It's not just about DeRay, right? I like DeRay. I like his work, but it's not just about him. It's about anybody who tries to organize a protest, knowing that anybody who is the organizer of a protest, especially against the police, could be sued. Even if that lawsuit is frivolous, even if they eventually win, the cost of dealing with that lawsuit is enough to keep most people from ever wanting to organize the protest. Like, I don't think I'm breaking news to say that protest organizers are not usually very well funded, right? Like, we're not talking about Elon Musk, right, is not organizing a protest at the Baton Rouge Police Department, right? It is people of more limited means who are organizing these protests. And if you hit them in their pocketbook like this, it makes it less likely that they'll try to do anything at all.
What should we be doing right now? Because I feel like there's like a massive strategy that may be 400 years in the making. And they have the playbook. They have the cheat sheets that they hand out to everyone. They have the talking points. They keep them real simple, and then they just ram them down our throats. It's like, and then you end up on your heels defending nonsense as opposed to trudging forward into, rights and success and all. So we're constantly on our heels, which is never a good place to be when you're in battle. And we're in battle.